Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I am your podcast host, Danny Vicente, and this is Coffee and Conversations, a place where we explore topics in technology, leadership, and innovation. Discussions about things that are keeping you up at night with industry experts, technology experts, and so much more. So grab your cup of coffee and join us as we dive in. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Thank you for joining another episode of Coffee and Conversations. Today, we are diving into media, broadcast, and entertainment. And I've brought a familiar voice to the podcast, but I've also brought a new one. And so I'm going to, as usual, let these guys introduce themselves. But on the new one, we have a gentleman by the name of Bryan Bedford. If that name rings a bell, it's because he is extremely famous. The man is a football guru. You've probably seen him on television. Maybe not. So we'll see what he says in a moment. But Bryan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that would be cool.
Yeah, thanks. Bryan Bedford, been at Cisco about 11 years and spent about 25 years in the sports media and tech space, and have been compatriots with my friend Ken here for a long time. My entire journey at Cisco has been around building our partner ecosystem around sports and media, and now heavily involved around IoT, but this is near and dear to my heart, so thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. And Ken, remind everybody who you are, but as soon as I hear your voice, they're going to know.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. Ken Martin. I lead our industry practice vertical globally for Cisco. And like Bryan, I mean, we've just been at this for a long time. Here it is going on my 19th year at Cisco. Most of that has been involved in this industry. So, we hear topics and, we've seen transitions and, how technology has changed and evolved the industry as a whole. And I'm pretty excited to talk about what we're talking about today.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining. And I guess I'm going to start with a very high level question here. And maybe Bryan, if you want to jump in on this one. Why is it that Cisco is in broadcast? What are we doing? What are we doing in broadcast and media? Why should the audience care?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the biggest thing is really around flexibility. Technology is changing now. The needs of consumers is really changing to really require broadcasters, teams, and so forth to be able to offer as much flexibility as possible. And what that means, technically is really becomes kind of a physics question, which you certainly don't want Ken or I talking about physics on this call. But when you get into 4K video, when you get into now 8K video, when you get into the requirements for new channels and OTT channels and so forth, you've got to be thinking about IP, because you really won't be able to scale. You won't be able to offer the things that your end customer wants without thinking about an IP first technology platform. And really, the last 6 or 7 years, we've just seen continual growth and importance by moving to IP. And the reason that it's becoming kind of compelling now, Danny, is because for most of kind of the history of broadcast and so forth, it really hasn't been. The technology wasn't there to support, the types of things that were available, precision time protocols, flexibility, the OS platforms to be able to support the kind of infrastructure. Now it's there. So there's really no reason not to do it. It's really now how quickly can we do it?
Yeah, I would say, from a technical side looking out. So what we're trying to do is we're always trying to bridge sales and marketing with IT, because there's, in years past, there's always been this separation of church and state, right? I don't know anybody in IT unless something goes wrong, and then I got to go find somebody that, can fix it. From a business side is the last thing you want to do from an IT perspective is tell somebody in sales and marketing or executives or leadership that you can't do it. We're not prepared to deliver that. And I'm talking about activations, and we see it at all these sporting events all around the world, is that the activation while starts in the venue and is very much focused in the venue, it's around and surrounding the venue now, right? So how do we activate different places, different, if we want to have a band, perform before the game to draw people to the venue without actually going inside? It's about content. It's about, how do you activate that content? And the last thing we want is somebody in IT to say, yeah, we can't do that, right? So when we think about how do you prepare yourself to leverage technology to do things that you're not doing today. And I think to Bryan's point, this is exactly the reason if you're even thinking about making these changes, now's the time. And, we'll walk through in the next, 20 minutes or so on why you benefit from making these changes, right? I mean, who benefits? What is in it for everybody? And because there's truly a sweetheart of a story at every level, not just in technology.
I love it. So okay, let me ask, because I think you both touched on this. Let me ask the follow-up question now. So SDI has kind of been the standard for 50 plus years, and now we're moving to IP. So what's the driving force? What is that thing that's pushing us from SDI over to IP?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things that are happening. First, you're seeing the networking technology is really built now to support it. So they have another option. So the first is just around optionality. There are some situations where SDI, I've seen situations where a broadcaster or a team has just done another SDI, rebuild. But now the technology gives the customer another option, which didn't exist up until about 5 years ago. So that's the first one, is that they have an option. The second is, why does that option make sense? Okay, so I think that's maybe the better question, is like, why would you go to IP? I'm kind of getting on to our moderator here, Ken, so it's probably not good of me to do that right out of the gate. But nonetheless, when I think about the why to do that, well, now the industry's kind of used this term common off-the-shelf hardware. It just means that the network switches, the network OSs are built in a way to handle and interface with all of these broadcast applications that to your point, for 50, 60 years, they were purpose-built for their own hardware. And now everything is really moving to an application to where they know they've got to just build software and let people like Cisco, who build the best-in-class networking gear, build that software that plays nice with those kinds of appliances to give their ultimate customers as much flexibility. Ken kind of half-jokingly talked about like that, it was there's a space that maybe we didn't walk down the hall into that room in the past or whatever. Now, if you're at the BBC, or if you're at the Atlanta Braves, or you're at CBS, and all of your IT operations are centralized, or the majority of them on Cisco, why wouldn't you have Cisco in your data center broadcast facility? Like, you already know how to use it, so it's like, you might as well, right? And then because of that, then that's giving those end operators the ability to do some really creative things that they've not been able to take advantage of in the past. Things like, scaling up to 4K and 8K video, they couldn't do that with SDI in the past. Being able to spin up a new channel in a flexible environment, or, scale up or scale down a channel for whatever need. Let's say it's the Olympics is the perfect example of that, right? Where you need to scale up because you've got big capacity that you need for a finite period of time. And then you got a couple of year break, so to speak. So I think, there's a couple of business reasons, there's a couple of technical reasons, but the biggest thing that I would kind of stress is the move to IP is giving the customer, and then giving ultimately our end customer, maximum flexibility. And that's really the why that people are making this move. Other than, it's a cooler, hipper, funner way to do it. And I think over the first couple of years, we had to really, make sure that the market knew that this was not some huge, it wasn't some unrealistic way of doing things. It was a way of really maximizing the trends and where technology is going. So that would be how I'd answer those questions.
Yeah, I'll just weigh in just a little bit here and just give my best John Madden, bam, where that if you think about, what has happened over the last 2 decades, everything has moved to IP, right? It started with voice several years ago. And then, it was, how do we take, the feeds that were already on IP, they're from the broadcast, and then they would push those feeds to the stadium, and then we would de-encode them and put them over coax and put them to the screen, and we were like, wait a minute, this is 12, 14 years ago when we started this whole IPTV, notion of why are we de-encoding it back into why not take IP all the way to the screen? You'll have way more flexibility. It's now, as Bryan stated, it's taken that broadcast, over IP, audio over IP. Basically, it gives so much more flexibility when it's on the IP network. Now, from a stadium perspective, you have hundreds of thousands of students going through class now that are learning the network. And so when you put it on the network, you basically open up your opportunity to have more people know how to take an IT position inside of your venue. So it's not very specific. Well, I have to be a video broadcast expert in order to manage this. Now, if it's over IP, you've opened up your workforce. And you're now, allowing yourself, your building to adopt to the needs of, and flexible needs, on the minute needs when it's over IP. And then, of course, who knows the network better than Cisco, right? I mean, if you're going to put it on the network, you trust the big company Cisco to help you out with that.
Well, I love everything except for the attack on my question. Kind of hurt a little bit.
I mean,
so,
I took it personally too. It wasn't even towards me.
Sorry, I'm the new guy. I need help. I need support.
Next time we'll submit our questions. How's that? And make you feel
I
better.
know. I'm sorry.
That's okay. This is a coffee and conversations, but I didn't tell you it's coffee in the cup. You never know.
Right.
So okay, I do have a question for you because you alluded to something in your response there. Both of you did, and so when we think of this, it's not really just small scale production. It's not just in an individual stadium or in an individual venue. This is a commercial broadcaster play as well, correct? It is for the larger production crews, and if it is, what are some of the benefits there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, is to be specific. I mean, we've seen some of the biggest brands in the world take advantage of this. Brands like the BBC, TV Global in Latin America, NBC, CBS Sports, Canal Plus, Foxtel in Australia, Nines in Australia. I mean, literally some of the biggest television broadcasters in the world now are leveraging Cisco's IP fabric for media. And it's become like one of the industry standards when you think about the move to IP. We've also seen, dozens of quote unquote ecosystem partners that have co-developed on top of what we're building here so that they can provide unique and custom integration, leveraging our Nexus dashboard controller. And they're able to do some really fascinating things. So, the benefits to having kind of these enterprise customers and now this expansive partner ecosystem is that they're able to do what I think is, kind of we're getting ready and we're starting to see kind of the 2.0 of really where this industry was going. If you think about the first 4 to 5 years, it was about, okay, we know we need to move to IP. We don't really know how to do it. To some of Ken's point on, and we don't have some of the workforce now. We have this legacy old guard of AV and broadcast engineers, but we know we need to hire a new skilled workforce with people that have got more networking knowledge. And it was kind of like more of a begrudging, well, I've done it this way forever and ever. I'm not really sure, but I will do it because somebody's telling me I've got to do it. Sure. Now I think the conversation is changing where people are saying, why wouldn't I do this? It's kind of like the conversation Ken and I used to have 11 years ago around wireless in venue. It's like, well, why wouldn't I do this now? Like, that's not even the conversation. So we're really at that point, Danny, where people are now saying, yeah, we have to do this. Like there's no other reason, because we need flexibility. We need to be able to move to new video standards like 4K and 8K. We need to be able to be flexible with the way that we disperse content, whether it's in venue, whether it's to multiple destinations. We need to be flexible now when we look at remote workflows. COVID helped accelerate that, where you've got studios in one part and you've got talent in another part of the world or another part of the country. So again, as you think about more flexible workflows, but you can't do that if you're not on IP, right? And so that all leans into kind of Cisco's kind of idea of being, scalable, being flexible, having a, simplified OS that integrates with this common ecosystem. If we're not doing those things, then those end enterprise customers or those sports customers or whatever, they're not going to gravitate to this. But because our strategy, I think, is working, they're really gravitating to this, and we've seen hundreds and hundreds of deployments over the last 5 years because of that strategy.
Well, folks, I just want to remind you, we do have a plethora of links down below, so I'm sure you're hearing some things that are whetting your appetite and you want to dig in a little bit more. Please use those links down below. We also, as usual, have our Ask Us link down below. So please do ask questions as they pop into your head, and I will make sure to send them all to Bryan and make sure that he answers every single one. No, I'm kidding, but please do ask your questions. We will get answers to you as quickly as we possibly can. All right, Bryan, so in your answer there, you mentioned quite a few times about our partner and the ecosystem of partners that we have. And so I want to give you an opportunity to discuss that a little further, because I would imagine partners come into play in a lot of these scenarios in a depth that needs better clarification, shall I say.
Yeah. Well, I think, Cisco's very partner-centric in everything that we do. And this is a space that is ripe for that and is super important to us. And I think that aligns to our strategy. Like we want our partners to be successful. We want our partners to drive profitability in their business, and anything that we can do to support that, we certainly want to do that. When I think about, this journey, I was going back before we came on here and looking back at kind of when I think it really started. That was really kind of December 2015, January of 2016, and there was this trade group called AIMS, Alliance for IP Media Solutions or something like that. I'm probably butchering that, but AIMS was started, and it was really, can we gather all of this ecosystem around IP and networking and broadcasting? Can we get everybody to talk the same language, common set of standards, common set of protocols? And can we do this in a way that everybody can be on the same page? Because we weren't exactly talking the same language. And that becomes difficult when you come from a legacy SDI world and now you're moving into an IP world. It'd be like the conversations Ken and I sometimes have, or we're not on the same page. Just kidding, Ken. So I say that, maybe that's me and Danny, I'm not sure. But I say that is that it took the industry a little bit to get on the same page. Now, when you have a conversation and you talk about IP, there's a common standard that everybody's kind of building off of. So development is now picking up steam, because that ecosystem is now, they've got one highway to drive down, so to speak.
I love that.
And before, the last 5 years ago, it was like multiple highways. It was like the flavor of the week when it came to IP. And so, Cisco and others in the space have really poured into those industry standard groups to, try to provide a pothole-free highway that people could drive down. And then we've seen partners like Grass Valley and Imagine and EVS and Skyline Data Miner and Sony and Nevion and so on and so forth that have built integrations inside of their product suite that then talk to the Cisco Fabric and our Nexus Dashboard controller. In addition to those ecosystem partners, now we've seen those legacy industry integrators that have been doing those SDI builds. They now know that their business has got to evolve, and they've got to sell and procure and install and integrate more IP solutions into their workflows, whether it be on the acquisition or all the way out to play out. And so those companies, whether it be, Diversified or Beck or any of the global SIs that are in this space, we've seen more and more people that are saying, listen, we want to do more with Cisco. And because you're partner friendly, because we can build and we understand and we can build repeatable practices with you, that's gotten a lot of that, that more traditional part of the business now moving closer and closer to Cisco. And then if you think about our traditional, more IT channel, they're also leaning in and saying, well, this is some green space that we haven't really explored. So we think, because of our kind of partner first approach to this, that ultimately gives customers the right to make choices. They have flexibility in choice. Standards are now common to where they can look at the best products. They can look at the best flexibility and scale. They can look at the buying programs. If it's a customer like, any one of the ones that we mentioned earlier, they may have an enterprise agreement or some sort of buying program with Cisco. Well, this gives them the opportunity to truly leverage that. So our partner community, in my opinion, is really one of our competitive differentiators. We've used it a ton in different other industries, but in this industry, I think, Danny, it's front and center, because without them and their ability to drive customer preference, we ultimately all won't be successful. So I appreciate you asking the question. It's a passion piece of it and an important piece for Ken and I as we think about how we grow this business for sure.
All right, so something that you tuned me on to last week that I dove into quite a bit, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk to it because I have lots of questions.
Was this Plato? Was this the NCAA bracket? What did I turn you on?
No. I had Purdue going quite further than they did. My NCAA bracket is I don't want to talk about it.
Very sorry.
Let's move on.
Better than Michigan.
You turned me on to the Devoncroft report. And there's a lot in there. And so I guess I want to ask you, first off, why should people pay attention to that report? What's in there, and what's some of the highlights that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, the guys at Devoncroft are really one of the main industry analysts that really follow the media and content production space really better than anybody. They get it. They understand the niche. They understand the players, the specifics, the customers, the partners, the manufacturers. They understand kind of the ebb and flow of all of that. So I think they're rooted in some expertise to begin with. Each year they do what they call the Big Broadcast Survey, and it's anything that that's got a blinking light in this space. They're trying to survey and get information. So that survey could go to a team, it could go to a sports franchise, it could go to a league, it could go to a manufacturer, it could go to a enterprise customer or service provider or telco customer that we mentioned earlier. It could go to all of the above. And what they're really trying to do, Danny, is get an understanding of what's important to them. If you're our customer in this case, if you're the three-letter station or you're a team, where are you spending your money when it comes to production and media and content workflows? And so they want to gather each year what are the trends, and so they start to kind of prioritize about 15 to 20 different things, and they start to stack rank those. And those are things for me in this industry that I've watched really closely. I want to see what's changing. Is it going to be, is this the year for 3D? Is this the year for AI? Is this the year for IP? What is is there some other whiz bang thing? But that's the context around this survey, and it's one that we watch really closely, Danny. And the trends as it relates to IP have been fascinating, and I'm sure that's where you want to go next, is what's happening in that world. But for me, that survey becomes kind of a beachhead because it allows our product teams and allows the industry to see, hey, A, you're not alone in some of your thinking, or maybe your thinking is different than where a lot of people are, but also allows that kind of partner ecosystem to understand what do we need to build and what do we need to create solution-wise that help meet the needs of our end customers. So take that survey and we really look at it and share that with a bunch of stakeholders inside of Cisco. So you want to get into the results?
I do. Go ahead, Ken.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's, it's spot on right there. If you're not doing, surveys tell us what to do, right? And we all use them. Cisco spends, nearly $7 billion a year in research and development. How do we know where we're spending our $7 billion? Well, we better have the pulse of the industry. Some of it is studies that are done just like this of our own. Some of them are industry studies. Some are just best guesses, you know what I mean? Where, like, hey man, I think we're going here, right? So we better prepare ourselves. But if you're not doing these, then you don't know what's happening. And how are you to prepare if you don't know what's next, right? And so these industry surveys do a lot for every one of us. They tell us what the fans expect. They tell us what people that are spending the money, even sponsors, how they want to spend their money in venue. They give us all the insights, right? And if you do enough surveys, not just your own, but you pay attention to reports like this, where these guys are industry specialists, you can start proactively doing some things versus reactively. And that's really the difference between earning a lot of money for your company, your franchise.
Yeah, and I remember, Danny, looking at this survey about 4 or 5 years ago. I'd have to go back and look at the specifics of it. It's probably that kind of same timing of, let's say, January of 2016. And I remember looking at it and I was like, IT was like maybe 6 or 7, and most of when people were talking about IT, it was all in post-production. It was all like, hey, we got it. And, we don't want to broadcast IP. No. Like, that's taboo. We ain't doing that, but we'll take it and we'll manipulate it in IP. We'll do it in a media asset management system, or we'll do it in a play out fashion, or we'll add graphics with the native content or whatever. So when it was like IT back then, it was all, after the fact, nothing live. We're not touching with the holy grail of live content. When we got to 2020, it got into the top 4. And then 2021, it was number 2. And I thought, okay, we might have a little something here, right? We made it into the top 3. And what was interesting is looking at what globally our top, the top, let's say 3,000 to 5,000 customers are saying in the fall of 2022, what was their number one thing that they were going to spend money on? And it was IP networking for live production. And it wasn't even close. And that was the thing that probably stood out to me. And I know, Ken, you and I talked a little bit about it, is it's one thing to be number one, but it's number one by a long shot. And that tells us that the market is really ready for this. And like a lot of things, we've all read about Moore's Law and, bell curves of where industries are transitioning. What that tells me is that, over the next 5 to 10 years, the bulk of the purchases that are going to be made for the next 15 to 20 years are going to be made in these next, this next 5 to 8 year window. And so there will be very few of those projects that will be done with legacy SDI technology. Most all of those refreshes or new builds or even brownfield opportunities, they're going to all move to IP. And so that requires the whole industry, not just Cisco, but everybody, to be thinking about innovation, kind of the 2.0 of live broadcast. What does that ultimately look like? How do we support hybrid environments? How do we support hybrid cloud kind of situations? How do we support just, flexible remote work environments, our hybrid work environments? We need to be thinking about that. And thankfully, Cisco is, right? That's really the power and the strength of what we're doing. But if we go back to that survey, what's important that from my perspective is just that it's now not just a fad. We're now to the point where this is mainstream business. There are literally projects happening every day of the week that are being worked on, bid on, integrated on, that are being planned for years and years in advance from, all shapes and sizes. And that's what's really cool is Ken and I, unfortunately, have enough gray hair in our beard and hair now to where we've seen a couple of different trends now. Ken mentioned the move to voice 20 years ago. I would say Ken and I kind of lived through the mobility trend of stadiums, and now we're living this one where we're seeing another trend in the move to IP in the world of broadcast. I don't know, Danny, if that means that we're just old or that we've been innovative or maybe a smidge of both, but that's pretty cool to kind of see it come full circle.
Mature.
I have to answer that.
We got to use words like mature now, not old. I mean, we're just,
mature.
We're more mature. Look, I think for, everybody that's listening and you go, okay, where do I get started, right? It's easy enough when I'm building a new building, when I start with nothing, I'm going to build it right. But what happens when I have an existing building? How do I start my, what you guys are talking about? If I'm moving from SDI and over to IP, like is it going to take an army? Is it going to take, years to convert? And we should touch on that, Bryan, because, and then when's the best time to do it? Sports, we're very focused on in season or out of season, right? If we're going to do something, even in live, live music, you're in concert season or you're not in concert season. That's when decisions are made and that's when you do the work. But I think a good example of this is what just happened down in Arizona. I mean, they hosted the NCAA championship playoff game there in the building. And they literally had, about 30 days to go from that to the Super Bowl. And in that 30-day window, they go, look, we set up, we've done our homework, we've prepared, now let's just do it. And they've converted the entire video head-in room, there at State Farm Stadium, in 30 days. And in doing so, not only did it give them, the broadcasters the ability to kind of set up and, they had 2 different floors, set up in the building, one to handle outside production, one to handle inside. But they knew what they were getting themselves into, right? They went from a standard Cardinals game is recorded with, 8, 9 maybe cameras. Super Bowl is double that. And so they started thinking ahead going, hey, if we're going to do this, we might as well do it now. Let's plan it out. And then once the Super Bowl hits, guess what? You're prepared. That stadium's prepared to handle any event that rolls through it now. And in doing so, they not only made their whole video head-in room much more manageable because, the before and after pictures would blow you away, right? They're using less equipment, which means they're using less power, which means that, there's a TCO story there. There's also an ROI story there. So if you're thinking about it like I am in this venue, when do I start? When's the best time to start? It doesn't take, a season to convert your existing head-in. And the benefits it gained, if you're going to benefit in a number of different ways, what's the best time to do it? And the answer to that is, straight away.
Yeah, and I think it's like a lot of things. This industry has matured. There's your word of the day here, Ken. It's evolved. Maybe that's even a better term in that. 6-7 years ago, this was complicated for the industry. It was different. It was new. It'd be kind of like putting your 16-year-old in a stick shift car. It was like, okay, this is a little different. I've never done this before, but it took a little bit to get the hang of it, right? And now we're to the point where there's been hundreds and hundreds of deployments. And so these partners, these manufacturers, these integrators have built systems and protocols and support models and service models to where they can do the things that Ken's talking about there in a pretty efficient and quick time frame. And we've seen that now to where that really becomes like part of that differentiation, part of that why question that you asked earlier. The other piece of this is now you're not dependent on those legacy broadcast engineers that have all this tribal knowledge that are pretty much a unicorn. Now you're able to really capitalize on this huge group of population that's coming up in the networking world that's now learning broadcast on top of that. And that world that has matured along with the technology standards that wrote that highway that we talked about. So I think all of that is allowing us to be much more quicker to market and really realizing that ROI and reducing that total cost of ownership quite significantly, because your costs are going down, your timeline is shrinking, and your ROI is going up. That is all the things that you want to happen if you're a customer.
I love it. So guys, one of my favorite parts of doing these podcasts is when the guests on get really passionate about a subject for two reasons. One, I get to just sit back and listen and learn. But two, you guys come alive, and both of you just did that for the last 10 minutes. It's pretty awesome. I didn't ask a single question; just kept going on and getting more animated, and I absolutely loved it. Folks, just another reminder: we do have a bunch of links down below. Please go take a look at those. I'm sure there's a wealth of information there. And when you come up with a question, or if you already have it, click the Ask Us Now button, and we will get those answers for you. I promise. Guys, we are about to head off in a month or so, and actually, I think for the first time in a while, be in the same room together over at the National Association for Broadcasters event in Las Vegas. And I want to give you an opportunity to obviously ask our audience to come out and visit with us and talk with us live. But what are we doing there? What are we showcasing at NAB this year?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, NAB is kind of seen as the industry standard in this space. And so, we certainly are committed to this area and committed to playing in this space and innovating. And we want to show people the innovation that we're executing on. And that's first and foremost. Secondly, from a showcase perspective, we will be certainly talking about Cisco's IP fabric for media, talking about the innovation that we have with our ecosystem, talking about Nexus dashboard, fabric controller, and all of the unique use cases that we've got around that, including some really cool kind of customer innovation that's out there. Maybe we can talk more about that on another podcast. We'll be talking a lot about data center and the media application for data center environments around our UCS and HyperFlex technologies. We'll be also showcasing with our partners at Intel and Quilt around streaming and CDN technology, and so some really cool use cases around that. And then, we've got a lot of, more traditional enterprise customers that also attend this. It might be a stadium, they might be a college, or, there could be various other folks that are there. And so we're going to touch on things like our digital signage offering with our friends from Wipro Vision Edge. We're also going to be showcasing some of our IoT solutions in the context of how people are thinking about ruggedized technology in more OT applications, or maybe less friendly weathered environments, if that makes sense. And then security. Security is a really important piece of the puzzle, and we want to make sure that we're certainly right for talking about security with everything that we're doing. So we'll be there April 15th through the 19th. We'll also be a partner and sponsor at Devoncroft as well. So, yeah, it'll be a fun week in Las Vegas.
Yeah, here's where I get excited about it, Danny, is that, one, Bryan and I both opened up this call saying we've been in this industry for a good long time, right? Cisco has been a part of this industry for a good long time. And so we can take the lessons learned over time. We can talk about, to Bryan's point, digital signage meets broadcast today. Okay, so what's happening in digital signage and why should I care? We'll have experts there. We'll have experts there to talk about the broadcast. We'll have experts there to talk about the network. I mean, you're not going to come to a lot of booths at NAB and be able to have a number of different conversations with a bunch of experts all in the same place. It's very, very, what you'll find at these shows, not to beat up on anybody, is a very niche product. This is my product. This is what it does. Um, we have the ability to obviously get deep into the product, but also the industry as a whole, where we see it going, and, have conversations just like this and be able to lend the expertise along with it. Like, what were we doing in a stadium 10 years ago? What were we doing for the three-letter broadcasters, 10 years ago, and how has it changed?
Yeah, and then I think the last thing is that these events give us an opportunity to have meaningful conversations, Danny. Not just, it's about relationships, and so we want to make sure that we have time with our trusted partners, we have time with our trusted analysts, members of the press, but then our customers, like an opportunity for them to ask us questions. And to Ken's point, like, we're trying to take a very comprehensive view of technology that then this ecosystem can build around. And so each one of the areas that I kind of aligned to or discussed earlier, there's probably dozens and dozens of partners that are integrating on each of those different areas. And that's what's really cool, is that we can foster so much innovation, so that ultimately, and we've seen this in a couple different industries, we really will see an ecosystem of applications that then are building off of a lot of the core foundational elements that Cisco's building. So it'll be fun to showcase all of that for sure.
Awesome. And like I've said multiple times, there is the Ask Me link down below. But if you want to ask these guys live and all the other experts we're going to bring on site live, please join us in Las Vegas next month. Bryan, we obviously got together last week and discussed what we would talk about on this podcast. And I am sure Ken already knows where I'm going with this, so that's why I'm not talking to him on this one. And I'm sure, like most guests on the podcast, you prepared mentally for what Danny was going to ask you. And
so much mental preparation.
Yeah, and inevitably, Danny didn't ask you a damn thing of what you expected me to. So now is your opportunity. It's your opportunity to address the audience with what is the thing that you want them to walk away from. Maybe I asked you, maybe I didn't, maybe you want to double down on something, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think Ken and I have kind of talked about it, but I think, listen, Cisco's, we're committed to this space. It's a space that's super important to us. Sports media and entertainment is it's a key tenet of what we do at Cisco, and there's so many different executive conversations, both internally and with partners and with our traditional partners and new partners. So, first and foremost, if you take anything away, if anything, we're doubling down. Like, we ain't going anywhere. Ken and I have done this way too long. We're going to go as fast as we possibly can, and we're trying to be as innovative and provide as much thought leadership in this space as possible. And so that's the big thing that, I know Ken and I are pretty passionate about is we're competitive, and we want our competition to see us, and we want our customers. I think they want to see us there. They want to see us in this space, and they want us to win as well. And so I like to win, and I know Ken is a competitor, and he wants to win as well. And so that would be my takeaway. The other thing is that we're innovating. We are innovating more now than you've ever seen us innovate. We're innovating in all the areas that we described will be at NAB. There's nobody putting more into security right now than Cisco. There's nobody doing more in IP broadcasts in the networking piece than Cisco. There's nobody doing more in the data center than Cisco. There's nobody doing anything more than digital signage than Cisco and Wipro. Like, in each of these areas, we are absolutely lapping our competition. And so we want our customers to understand that. And that gets me pretty stinking fired up, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, and look, from me, Danny, everybody wants to hear a success story, right? And then they go, well, what did you do over here? Or where'd you do it over here? I think that's the one thing that we bring is tons of experience in this space to understand. I can tell you what they've done. We can tell you what we've done, not just in North America, but from around the globe. Bryan touched on Australia, what we're doing in Europe. Of course, here in the U.S., we have hundreds of examples of what we can go on. So experience is a big one for us, but, also where you're going. If you're going to Vegas, you're going to see a big black ball, right behind the Venetian. It's just so happens to be the the next best venue that everybody on the planet is going to be talking about. Content in this, and of course, I'm referring to the sphere, MSG sphere that sits behind the Venetian, purpose built for content distribution, right? I mean, it's overload. It's one of these venues that I get excited. I've been to a lot of stadiums around the world. I get excited about getting into this again. I've, of course, been through it already, but to see a finished product, you want to know what we're doing for broadcast moving forward. Let's talk about that project, because there's nothing like it on the planet. And by the way, there'll be another one because of the success that, we'll have at this one. So yeah, I mean, it's experience in what we've done in the past, looking in the rearview mirror. It's also looking out the windshield. And let's talk about what's coming up next.
I love that. Yeah, you won't be able to miss the sphere when you're in Las Vegas. It's
Yeah.
definitely going to stand out. Well, as you can see there, Bryan, being on the podcast multiple times, Ken already knew the final question of this, so I didn't even have to tee him up. He knew exactly what to say there, and I guess that's my throw out to you. I'd love to have you back on the podcast. I can speak for myself, but I think I speak for the audience here. There was a wealth of knowledge that you shared, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And Ken, as always, I appreciate you taking the time on this podcast. Folks, one last time, we do have a bunch of links down below, as well as an Ask Us. Please do click that and ask away, and we will get those answers for you. And join us in NAB, if you can, next month in Las Vegas. That link is also down below. Gentlemen, thank you again for your time, and we'll talk to you on the next podcast.
Enjoy. Thanks, guys.